Here's Shed. Off the window, no. Roberts tried to get it. Shed for the win. Got it. Jamal Shed plays the hero again.
Back to pass. Donovan Smith. Smith steps up in the pocket, unloads it, throws it all the way downfield into the end zone. Tipped, and it is caught. Caught by the Cougars. Caught for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Caught by Stephon Johnson.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby.
Yes! Welcome to the Scott and Holland podcast. Back tonight, I think the most wonderful time of the year, a Cougar football preview episode. Optimism, such as it is going into any season, is at the absolute high point. And not that we don't have interest in both sides of the ball here, including special teams as well, like et cetera, et cetera. Defense wins championships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But let's just be honest with ourselves, Houston Cougar fans, wherever you're listening or watching as a fan base, we like offense. Innovative offense.
Always have.
Kind of been this program's thing for the better part of the last 60 years since Bill Yeoman invented the veer not to get his ass fired after a rough start to his time coaching the University of Houston's football team. Bobby, this is our first preview as the two of us running the show, careening off the road without the structured, the discipline, the clear-eyed vision that our co-host is no longer with us. He has moved on to the great beyond of not doing a podcast every week, Dustin. Bobby, I'm talking about him before I talk to you, so I'm going to stop that. I'm going to stop this train of thought. I'm going to get to this awesome episode.
I know where I stand. I know where I'll always stand, buddy.
We have a really interesting interview tonight as well. Like, I don't say it lightly. I think we've done fewer interviews over the years, but I think the ones that we do, like, we get really hyped about. I'm really hyped for you guys to hear the conversation Bobby and I just had, somebody with a really unique perspective. So I will stop bogarting the time here. Bobby, how are you doing, friend?
I'm wonderful, man. Just I think I mentioned it in the last episode, moving, and that commences in 3 days. So I got just about everything packed, just some little things, and next time you see me, I will probably have a different background, so that'll be fun.
As long as I can see the Robertson Stadium sign that you'll have wherever.
I'll try to figure out. I got to figure out where I put it. If it's going to be in the, if it's going to make the new office, we'll see what happens.
That's true. It's got to make the cut. Although I hope the fact that's from Robertson Stadium gives it a bit of an edge here. Going to mention our little housekeeping here at the top. Of course, please support our friends at Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com, makers of incredibly comfortable vintage collegiate wearables, including a great Houston Cougar collection. Use our promo code PAWD15. That's PAWD15. At charliehustle.com, get 15% off your order and get it in time for the upcoming Cougar football season that we're going to be talking about here tonight. And of course, also mention Third Ward Racket Club. This time I will actually put our store in the bio, all profits from Third Ward Racket Club merch, including visual reveal for those of you that are watching this, the Third Ward Racket Club Houston Blue t-shirt. Very comfortable. I will say is a cool design courtesy of our friend Bill. Is a cool design where 100% profits go to support Houston Cougar tennis, but it's an incredibly comfortable shirt. And I'm now at least one washing into having it, and it has not shrunk a bit. It is every bit the awesome shirt. I'm a bigger guy and it fits me very well. So please go to the link in the episode description and go to support Third Ward Racket Club and support a worthy cause that is Houston Cougar tennis. Bobby, got a little bit of news to talk about here at the top. A couple of quick Cougar-related news items, if you will let me.
Fine, you convinced me. Let's do it.
We'll do it. I know I don't think a tough sell here to talk about Cougars in the Olympics. Really cool with the conclusion of the Paris Olympics earlier this week. We had a couple of Cougs get medals, get on the podium in the men's 4x1 final. They competed individually earlier. We talked about that, I think, last episode, but Cougar track athletes Sean Maswanyani and Louis Angeliff competed for South Africa and Great Britain, respectively. As I said, in the men's 4x1 relay finals at the Paris Olympic Games, South Africa was second, I believe, with the best ever time for an African country. And Great Britain was just in the below step at third. Really an unbelievable summer for both guys. Like Louis Angeliff, Bobby, imagine going back to school in a few weeks off of an Olympic medal, an NCAA championship, and winning your country's national championship in the 100. Like it's been the summer of Louis. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a crazy turn of events for him, right? Like, you're one of the best you're one of the best sprinters in the country. You prove you're one of the best sprinters in the country. You go, you win, you get to go to the Olympics, and then you get to go back and have to take college algebra 2 or whatever it is.
Gotta also mention, I was gonna say, cool thing also is that those guys are both fairly young athletes. I would say probably at least 1 to 2 Olympics ahead of them in their careers as well. But I mean, even if this is it, both guys get to be part of that extremely small group of people who could say that they were an Olympic medalist, and that's just cool as shit, man.
Yeah, just a really cool thing to just be a part of. It's always that was always one of my things that I would have loved to have been a good enough athlete to even qualify for some country that I'm vaguely attached to. Just to participate just once or twice. The getting the tattoo with the Olympic rings, I've seen that a couple of times. That's really cool. And that's just something that you'll always get to tell, right? Especially for a track athlete, it's very much the Super Bowl, right? You hear stories of old men who have their grandchildren around them telling the story of how they played one down in the Super Bowl, let alone winning a medal in the Olympics. So really cool overall experience for those guys there.
Bobby, do we have breaking news?
I don't know if it's breaking news, but Duarte did just tweet that another round of interviews for the AD job is expected Thursday and possibly Friday. An announcement could come early next week. So, Duarte tweeted out his story. I just dropped something. Sorry about that. If you heard that, Duarte tweeted out a story where we talked about the University of New Mexico. I'm forgetting his name because
Eddie Nunez, I think.
Yes. Was kind of the leading candidate. Duarte in this tweet also said at least one prominent head coach met with a candidate early. And considering it was the football fan fest today, I would almost assume that would be Mr. Sampson who met.
I don't know. I feel like it's a coin flip of. I feel like it's a coin flip of.
Yeah, because he was already there.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I assume Sampson's on campus, and also like, Willie Fritz is maybe a little more indisposed, but I mean, could have been him as well.
Yeah. My guess, if you were giving me odds on it, I would set the favorite at Sampson being the one who spoke with him. But we don't even know if it was him, right? There were other candidates, but if that's the case, then we could see something next week. What you think, Sam? Early next week.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, like, I don't think that's still almost 2 full months in between Chris Pesman getting kind of surprisingly dismissed and an athletic director hired. I get it. Also, like, it's the summer. Not saying that you don't have stuff going on, and not saying that 2 months isn't. We'll just say an unusually long amount of time to fill this vacancy. Not the kind of amount of time that fills you with a lot of really high confidence in the process. But glad it'd be almost done, and glad that we'll have something else to talk about when we reconvene next week.
Yeah, and you kind of feel like it's college sports, so it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. But you feel for New Mexico, right? If they lose their
rough
AD,
time to I mean, you're still Division I department, so you're still like, I mean, relative to all colleges that field an athletic team, like, you're still a big fish relatively. But yeah, not the best timing. Don't feel great about that. But also, we need an athletic director. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, I don't. I don't feel that bad, but we've been on the other end of that, where you're just kind of sitting there going like, yeah, y'all could have hired him a couple of months ago. That would have been nice.
Yeah. Only other quick news before we get to the main topics of tonight's show. We talked last episode about Ross Kivett leaving the University of Houston baseball staff to take the same job on the Tennessee staff. We have news of Cougar baseball quickly filling the vacancy by hiring the now former, but was, as of the last couple of years, head coach at UT Arlington, Clay Van Hook, the sitting head coach at UT Arlington, Clay Van Hook, to fill Kivett's position on the staff. Van Hook had only been on the job at UTA a couple of years, but before that was a really well-regarded assistant at Oklahoma. Before that was at Rice under Wayne Graham. I think the last good years of that program under Graham, was an assistant on the 2022 Oklahoma team that went to the College World Series. People who know the sport better than me seem to think that Van Hook's a good hire. My understanding is a pretty big part of his decision to come to U of H was that his son has a condition called renal dysplasia, and being near Texas Children's allows the family to deal with the stuff that comes with that with a lot more convenience. So always nice when a good hire like Van Hook seems to be purely on baseball merits that you can, make some real life stuff benefit from that as well. Should round out Todd Wooding's staff for the coming season. Van Hook joins Woody Williams, who was promoted from an off-field role to be the pitching coach, and Matt Rada, who will be in his second season as an assistant with the Cougs. I think that hits all the high points, Bobby, before we get to our main topic. Is that right?
I was just going to hit on the coaching hire. Ooh, I just forgot I had all that ink on my hand. Kind of just something I noticed about the coach. Looking at their roster, there's a surprisingly high amount of Houston guys on their roster. I think they had like
UTA.
5 or 6. Yeah, UTA had like 5 or 6 Houston guys, and that kind of gives me a little bit of hope that this isn't going to be a new area to him. He's already got contacts in the area, things like that. And I'm not somebody who's like, oh man, we have to have Houston players all the time, but it does help. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sure he recruited Houston for OU and obviously for Rice when he was on that stuff as well. So now seems to check all the boxes. Like that's the thing, man. Like I would say that as last year's UH baseball staff did. Like don't question the credentials of the assistant coaches. It's one of those like, why isn't this adding up to it more? But like not to be negative, like I say, I like the Van Hook hire a lot and hope it helps this team have a breakout season in 2025. All right, no more false starts, Bobby. You want to talk some Cougar offense?
I couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, man. Like I said in the intro, a good defense is important. I think we saw the last couple seasons what a bad defense can do to your, efforts to win football games. Doesn't help, isn't good. And one of the things I think we're excited about generally is that this is a very credible defensive coordinator. This is a head coach whose teams had really good defensive results at Tulane in the last 2 years, but deep down, as Cougar fans, let's be honest with ourselves, offense. We like scoring touchdowns. We like points. And I think most of us, as much as there are stylistic preferences, I think this fan base has, the run and shoot years if you're older, the really good air raid offenses of the Keenum years and what have you. I think this fan base right now, Bobby, would just be over the moon for an offense that does something well. Not that the offense never was good under Dana Holgorsen. I mean, I think the back 2/3 of the 22 seasons with Clayton Tune and Tank Dell, it was a great passing offense. It was a passing offense that made you wonder, why did we spend a good chunk of the season not just leaning into this passing offense, not to relitigate 2022's failings there? But I think it's kind of the great unknown with Willie Fritz, and it's an exciting unknown because I think we all, to varying degrees in the last 4 or 5 years, lost the faith in the last staff and the last head coach, especially a guy who had a reputation as this great offensive mind, to actually put an offense that consistently made sense on the field. Like that back half of the 22 season kind of being the exception. Like the one really good team under the last head coach was mostly a good team because of this great defense that had 2 NFL cornerbacks, a bunch of other future kind of borderline pro guys in the front 7. That's why it never really came together offensively like I think we all had hoped it would when Dale Holgorsen got here. But the good news being Willie Fritz over the years has coached a lot of very good offenses. So I will pass this off to you, Bobby, kind of our first talking point here, because I think we wanted to kind of change things up. I think for the written preview format, if you're someone in our position, if you're trying to put together notes, you want more than anything to have let's say quarterbacks. Like you want to have that information broken out for you. And I don't know if that works as well. And I've heard a lot of other podcasts that kind of do a similar topic as us kind of go this way. So we're going to kind of structure this more discussion questions, discussion topics, stuff that we think is interesting, stuff that we want to see answered over the course of a season. So why don't you take us into this, Bobby?
Yeah. So, the first question is, what is this offense going to look like? And what have we seen from it? Kind of going back, this was kind of something that I tasked us to do is what do you see from the offense that Willie Fritz has run at Tulane, Georgia Southern, Sam Houston, wherever you can find the tape, and what's it going to look like? What can Cougar fans expect? out of this offense, out of this Willie Fritz offense. And so for me, I think the biggest thing is it's going to look different than what we're used to seeing, right? Cougar fans, I think we expected with Dana Holgorsen that Dana Holgorsen was going to come in and we were going to see the ball slinging around everywhere. He kind of had this idea or this reputation that kind of preceded him that he was going to sling the ball around, and he told us that he wanted to go 50-50, but it was just very ineffective. I think you and I had that discussion a bunch of times last year on this podcast, all that, where we were going, he's going 50-50, but he's just running it up the middle, or there's no motion. I think that was a big complaint that I had last year, was that we weren't doing anything effective motion-wise. We weren't exploiting matchups and things like that. So one thing I do expect us to do is I expect to see us in shotgun, but I really think the run is going to play a major role in this offense. I read a story about the relationship Fritz had with the OC, the guy who's now at LSU, who came
Slade Nagel.
And Slade Nagel kind of ran this offense, and Willie Fritz told him, you can kind of do what you want, but we're going to run the ball. So be ready, Cougar fans, to watch us run the ball this year. Just plain and simple, we're going to run the ball this year. I expect to see more tight ends. I think I pointed this out when we did our recruiting episode. Tight ends, we got a bunch of transfers in this year. It's clear that we're going to run some tight ends. And at Tulane, you saw a lot of 21 personnel, 2 tight end, 1 running back, right? Or is it 12 personnel? I get those backwards sometimes. Playing 2 tight ends has been common in most of his offenses. The other thing I kind of noticed, just going back watching a lot of his tape,
it's 12 personnel, by the way. I looked it up.
12 personnel. Thank you. The other thing I noticed is how much he's been willing to change and adapt based on his personnel. Willie Fritz is a guy who wants to run a little bit of an option offense, maybe not a triple option. I don't think he's out there. I think at Georgia Southern he ran a triple option.
I have something on that. So,
but they were absolutely a triple option team before him, and they have pretty much always been. So, but he's been willing to change. This past year with their quarterback at Tulane, he was a good thrower. He was a really good passer. And so you just saw them pass a little bit more, maybe get a little bit more pass happy than you saw from any of his teams before that. I don't know if you noticed that either. At Tulane, I really saw them find some speed. They found a couple of guys who really could make a difference in the run game and in those matchups, right? Creating those mismatches. One of the things they used that for was RPO. So a lot of RPO out of Tulane last year, and the preceding year, where they would send a guy in motion and quarterback had the option to hand it off. He could even do the pitched forward as like the jet sweep. He could kind of do that. He could hand it off, or he would do a little pop pass. It worked for them quite often. So look for RPO this year. I think that's going to be a big thing, a big change that I don't think we saw much under Dana Holgorsen. I don't think we've seen that much in a Houston Cougar offense, right? The RPO just hasn't been there. We've always been a school that just kind of airs it out. And I'll be honest, in the RPO, I love the idea of using Donovan Smith in that way. Donovan Smith is kind of built for the RPO, and I think I was kind of screaming for that last year. I don't know if you remember, but I was like, we can run an offense that looks a lot like that Auburn under Cam Newton offense. And let me tell you, that was a lot of, maybe not RPO, but there was a lot of option in that where Cam could hand it off or take off the other way. There was a lot of options in that sense, and now Donovan Smith has an arm good enough that he can take advantage of an RPO. He's a bigger guy who can move. Last year, though, at times he seemed to struggle with some decision making, and that led to some really ugly interceptions. So I think a big key this year is going to be, can Donovan Smith process things fast enough? If Donovan Smith can show that he can process the reads properly, this offense could be really good. There are some concerns, but this Willie Fritz offense has been good pretty much everywhere he's gone. They don't put up 70 points like we think of with a good college offense, but his offenses score. He has very efficient offenses. So I think if Donovan Smith can really get his reads down and nail his reads, he's not going to be perfect. No quarterback is. But if Donovan Smith can read the linebackers properly, if we can get some speed on the outside, creating mismatches, getting linebackers to actually follow people, and just create a little bit of havoc pre-snap, I think this offense can be pretty good. What about you, Sam? What'd you notice?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his teams over the years, the many, many years prior to this one that he's been a head coach, the teams have generally, but not exclusively, I think the offense has skewed a bit more to the run. But I think, and it's something you kind of touched on, what's important is he's shown flexibility. He's shown an ability when the personnel demands it to adjust to it, which I think is the most important thing that you can do as a head coach, is to not just be, well, I'm a square peg and round hole this. Like, I mean, might at least somewhat describe, this past staff. He's going to fit what he does to, I think like you talked about with Pratt and Tulane, like you're not going to, like, you want to use Michael Pratt as a passer. Michael Pratt, whether you think he's a backup or a starter or whatever, Michael Pratt was an NFL caliber prospect, like day 2, day 3 caliber, but was an NFL caliber guy. Like, you're not going to have that guy passing the ball 10, 15 times a game. You're going to use that guy to his best skill set. They also didn't have really an experienced running back last year after Tyjae Spears graduated, so makes it even harder to go run first there. I think going back, man, the offense that really made me notice Willie Fritz as a head coach, period, his second and third teams at Sam Houston State, the teams that got to the national title game, man, I got to catch a decent amount of both teams' playoff runs because, they'll air them on ESPN2 and U and News. And I like the FCS playoff, man. Like, but this was BCS era, so like I was so starved for anything like, a football quarterfinal playoff game with Sam Houston and like Montana State, like that.
What a
that
novel
seems really fun.
idea.
Yeah, no, I mean, as I say, what am I going to do? Something more productive with my time? But like both those seasons, I caught multiple Sam playoff games and really, really enjoyed that offense. It was run first, but it was very explosive. They had 2 really good backs, Tim Flanders and Richardson Sear. They moved them around the field. They did everything they could to creatively get those guys the ball. I would say it wasn't exactly the same, but it was the closest thing I've seen another school do to the West Virginia offenses from back in the day. They were spread, but they were explosive. They were run first. Really, really fun. You know how sometimes you watch another team and think, especially if your team's not doing so hot, man, I'd love to see my team run something like that. Was 100% me in those Sam Houston, Willie Fritz offenses. And he ended up going to Georgia Southern, which you mentioned before the 2013 season. His 2 years there, they were inside the top 25 in scoring offense both years. They were number 1 in the country rushing. Probably his most explosive rushing offenses in all his years coaching were Georgia Southern. Also a really, really overlooked, like, good job. Winning 17 games and going 14-2 in your conference as a transitioning up to the FBS program. Like, that's really good. Like, I think his accomplishments, Willie Fritz's at Sam and Tulane, maybe catch your eye first, but really good job there. And you mentioned it. Southern is a school that is a traditional triple option school. As much as you think of U of H as like, run and shoot and air raid and passing and stuff like that, Georgia Southern's even more, just fixated on running the triple option. I think he did a good job adjusting what they did. It was less traditional under center option and more shotgun option. Like he didn't stray away from what I think the school has typically done tendency-wise. He was inheriting a triple option roster, so he wasn't going to start running the air raid there. He fit what he liked to do with what he knew his roster could do, which I think is the best thing. And in Tulane, kind of his first 4 or 5 years there was more run first. But, to their credit, they realized that they have this future pro in Michael Pratt. They go from something that looked a little bit more like what Georgia Southern did to maybe a more 50-50, an offense that allows your quarterback to show off a bit more than maybe like the 2018 and 2019 Tulane offenses, which are good rushing offenses, but probably not the level of passing game that you want to showcase a guy like Michael Pratt. And, again, that flexibility to open things up a bit when you have a high-level passer, I think reflects positively. You need to have an identity. You and I, Bobby, have talked so much on and off air about this program not really having one consistently on offense like you thought maybe they would under Holgorsen the previous 5 seasons. Fritz's teams very clearly have an identity, but just as importantly, he's a guy who's shown that he'll adjust to the roster that he has, which I think is a big positive. Real quick also, Kevin Barbay looked at some of his offenses as well. Was at Central Michigan in 2021 when the Chips won their most games since 2009, averaged over 32 points per game. They're really balanced offense there. They had 2 quarterbacks who combined for over 3,000 yards passing, running back who had over 2,000 yards from scrimmage, had a good balanced offense the year after that at App State as well. They averaged over 200 rushing and passing there. Were top 25 in scoring offense as well. Was OC at Mississippi State last year under Zach Arnett, who was promoted kind of late in the offseason to head coach after the untimely passing of Mike Leach. Mississippi State, not Michigan State, had to start 3 different quarterbacks because of injuries. They dealt with, I think, one of the more difficult transitions you're going to do from the Mike Leach pass it most of the time air raid to like literally any offense that's not an air raid. And it didn't go so hot. I mean, you're never going to turn down an SEC job, but I would be curious if you gave Kevin Barbay truth serum. If you're App State's offensive coordinator, do you turn down an SEC job? But maybe look at that roster and be like, I don't know. Like this is going to be rough to what I want to do, which for Barbay has been pretty balanced run offense that features the run, kind of fits what Willie Fritz does to, a roster that's equipped to maybe throw the ball 55, 60 times a game. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That didn't go so hot, but I think you're going to have alignment between what Barbay wants to do and what Willie Fritz wants to do as well, which I think is a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything you said is very fair, and I think the thing that has me excited for this offense is the fact that we both talked about it. It's going to be adaptable. We're going to see changes. We're going to see changes as the season progresses. We're going to see changes as the years progress. Where Willie Fritz does what Willie Fritz thinks is best, and it's not just, I am an air raid guy and all I do is throw it, or I am a guy who runs a pro style offense and that's all we do. We're not going to see that. So I'm pretty excited for that.
And so to kind of expand on one of the topics that we hit on with this, I think I talk about Donovan Smith here, and what do you hope to see different from him this season? And do you think he's finally in a scheme that fits what he does? And what do you think kind of a successful offense with Donovan Smith looks like, knowing his limitations, but knowing also like what he does well?
Yeah, I think for me, what a successful year for Donovan Smith looks like is just making the right play at the right time, not trying to go too much at a time, not trying to get too much on a play, accepting that maybe you made the read wrong and you're just going to get back to the line of scrimmage. Okay. I'm okay with that. As long as you bounce back. I don't want to see him trying to force things. It felt last year again like he was trying to force things at times, where he was trying to fit balls into places he shouldn't. He was maybe making a bad read, things like that. I just want to see the game kind of slow down for Donovan Smith this year. I think this is a big year for Donovan Smith in general, in his football career. But I just want to, there becomes a point where the game slows down and you're no longer thinking, you're just reacting. And I'm hoping, even though there's this offense change, I'm hoping that it just gets a little bit easier for him. And I think a good year for him. Maybe we see passing touchdowns come down, interceptions come down, but maybe we get a few more rushing touchdowns out of it. I think just making the right play. I know that sounds very generic, a very generic thing to say about a quarterback. What do you want him to do? I want him to make the right play, but I want him to make the play. And even if he doesn't make the right play, to just kind of accept it and not try to force it. Don't try to break 4 tackles on a play in which you made the wrong read, right? Don't try and break 4 and then you cough up the football or something like that. Just lick your wounds, get back to the huddle, and let's get them on the next play. Does that make sense?
No, I think so.
What about you? What's it look like for you, Sam?
I think, I think just something that uses what he does well. And I think you and I believe this offense is going to feature more RPO. And I would say that generally fits his skill set better than what U of H did a year ago, because I really do think he is one of the best short yardage rushing quarterbacks in the country. Not in the Big 12, like in the country, period. And we're now in an era where it's easier than ever to run short yardage with a quarterback within the rules of the college game. And made it extra maddening when it took U of H until the Baylor game, I believe, to figure out, hey, let's use our 6'5", 230-pound battering ram of a quarterback in a short yardage run situation when we have struggled badly. Let's maybe not call this, the delayed handoff off guard on 3rd and half a yard ever again. Let's please not do that. And I don't think for any of the offense's future struggles, which I think are going to be more personnel than scheme, just given the league you're in, given the roster that the staff inherited. I think it's going to be more personnel. I don't think how it will choose to utilize Smith as a runner will be a problem. I really don't. I really do think that is going to be one of the things that we like most. So I think it'll be an offense that uses him I don't think Donovan Smith's at 1,000. He's never going to be an explosive rushing guy. He's not Greg Ward. Honestly, he might not even be Clayton Tune in terms of explosiveness, but I'd also say between the tackles, he's probably a better runner than both of those guys. And I think there's something there. This team doesn't lack for rushing talent. This team doesn't lack for guys who could be difference makers in the run game. I think for any personnel failings, I don't believe Smith's ability to run, and I certainly don't believe the talent you have coming back at running back is going to be lacking. So I think in that sense, against maybe not the lesser competition, but against in the games where you're not going to be as outgunned in terms of veteran proven guys on the opposing roster, I think we'll see an offense that makes more sense. This is going to be one of the best offenses in the league. Don't think so. I think that's asking a lot of a first year coach who didn't inherit a great situation here. But I think in November, we're going to look at the season like, yeah, it's kind of a year one, but the offense made more sense. Like what they tried to do week in, week out with Donovan Smith made more sense. And certainly compare that to his 2023 season. I think we're going to see a season where he doesn't end up throwing 9 picks in his last 5 games like he did in 2023. And we'll still see the guy who had a really good stretch from that Tech game through the West Virginia game, through the game against UT Austin, where he proved he could be a difference maker, even in a scheme that didn't always use him the best of his abilities. I feel like for the first time in his career, since he took over about halfway through the 21 season as a redshirt freshman, he'll be in an offense that fits him in what he does well. He isn't coming into an offense where he was the second string guy and he's replacing an injured Tyler Shuck, or he's coming into the staff of Dana Holgorsen. They just took him because he's a Big 12 guy in the portal and never maybe fully understood like what this guy does well. Like I think that's what his season's going to look like, even if I think there's some bigger things maybe preventing this team from, winning like 8 or 9 games, the tough schedule, the fact that the roster, 1 year of the staff actually building it. So.
Yep. So we talked about Donovan Smith. Let's talk about another player on the offense that is a difference maker for this team. What do you think this offense looks like for Joseph Manjack?
I think the difference here, and maybe the first point I have isn't so much scheme, but he's the veteran guy now in this receiver room. I mean, think about when he came in this program, 2022, you're looking up to a veteran like Tank Dell. Missed a lot of that season hurt, while guys like Matthew Golden, Sam Brown had bigger roles in that 22 season. Last year, he finally has most of a full season healthy, is consistently, I would say, your best receiver not named Sam Brown. And with how many guys you lost, in that position group to the portal, a guy you got to be excited that U of H held on to, a guy excited to see in, this new offense under this new staff. I think now that he's the vet, now that he's unmistakably someone in the position group that, the opposing scouting report's probably gonna be like, hey, like Joseph Manjack, probably like the top proven guy there. And that he showed an ability even in seasons where he still didn't have a lot of D1 experience or wasn't, now has a fully healthy college season under his belt. I think that's going to be so valuable. And I think it's going to allow the younger, less proven guys in this receiver group to, I think, blossom, that it maybe take pressure off those guys as well, but also be a guy uniquely in his game. Like, he's guys that catch tough balls. He's a guy who's going to be good in the red zone. And I think it's going to be very much to the benefit of this passing game. Yes, you lost a lot to the portal. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like Matthew Golden, there's a reason why he's in the burnt orange school. Like why a program that was coming off a CFP season thought Matthew Golden could contribute. There's a reason why Sam Brown's at Miami. But I do think that if the last staff left you anything, it was a fair amount of depth. And I think some interesting new guys brought in by the new staff as well.
Yeah, for me, I think Manjack, I'll be honest, I see him going off this year. I was kind of trying to see, kind of how I thought he would get used by this offense, right? And this offense is I talked earlier about a lot of motion, a lot of RPOs, things like that. Fritz and Barnaby use speed well, and you'll see Manjack used even as a decoy on a lot of things like that. I know when you think of Joseph Manjack, you don't think of a like speed demon kind of guy, but he had some open field plays plays last year where he got up to speed, right? I was on a website, I can't remember which one, and he was one of the top 10 he clocked one of the top 10 fastest mile per hours last year. You see his 40 time and it's like 4.5 and you're like, whoa, that guy's not that fast. He's football fast, right? Joseph Manjack is football quick. And I just see them using him as a decoy in the run game and on jet sweeps. I expect him to be put in motion a lot and getting the linebackers in motion and moving and having to follow him and kind of getting guys out of position pre-snap to create that pre-snap havoc so that Donovan Smith has an easier RPO. You bring him across and you don't give it to him and he flares out on the screen and now you have the RPO with the running back right there. So I think it's going to be a very, very good a good year for Joseph Manjack.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a rising tide, lifts all boats situation. I think he'll help guys like Mekhi Muse coming in from Georgia and Boogie Johnson returning with him in the receiver group, kind of be that veteran group right there, and I think be the most proven guy of that trio. Kind of, maybe a little bit lower on the radar. This is one I'm very interested for your answer in, since we kind of kicked this around as a discussion topic. I want you to make the case for me which offensive player who's not one of the first names that we'll bring up, like your Donovan Smith, your Parker Jenkins, your Manjack, like which guy on this offense do you think is going to end up being, well, let me say all conference, because that's, you're at the whims of the voters now, but we'll say all conference caliber season when it's all said and done this year. Who's your guy there? Okay,
so I'll be honest, I really struggled to get this down to one, so I didn't. I went with two. And both of them are the tight ends, right? Jaden York and Malik Carr. It's going to be a big year for tight ends, as I've said, I think 15 times in this episode so far. It's an opportunity for our tight end room to, one, grow. I mean, we brought in a bunch of transfers, a lot of young guys, so it's a spot that this staff has really focused on in terms of bringing up their depth. They're going to be a key spot for him. And Malik Carr was a good tight end for Michigan State last year. He actually ranked second in receptions for that team. So to bring somebody in who can, it's the Big Ten, so tight ends get a lot of receptions. And if you can be second on your team in Michigan or at Michigan State in receptions, that's really good. And then Jaden York played 12 games for Tech, played a lot of special teams. What I'm interested in is with that added playing time that he's probably going to get here, he's probably going to be the number 2 tight end, the number 1-2. They'll probably they'll run 2 tight end personnel because Fritz has done that a lot everywhere he's gone. They'll both be on the field. I think with this added playing time, is Jaden York going to see an increase in production? Like I said, he played a lot on special teams, had a lot of special team snaps, and some offensive snaps. So I'm interested to see where he goes, but I think those two are really, because Cougar fans don't think of tight ends very often. Can you name like 5 Cougar tight ends that we've ever had? Thank you. I saw your face there, and you seem like you.
I could do Mark Hafner, and I'd have
Mark Hafner. Yep.
Yeah, that's Mark Hafner, and I have to think about it for a while. There's probably like 1 or 2 that like, oh yeah, that guy, I forgot. But after Mark Hafner, I'd have to start thinking a bit. Justin Johnson was kind of a hybrid on the 2011
but
team.
Most of the guys have been hybrids.
That's two. That's
it. So you don't think of them as like a traditional tight end in any of our offenses that we really had, right? Hafner was just kind of a big target. He could block for sure, but like, these guys seem like they can block and go out and catch some passes. So it's going to be really interesting. I think those are the 2 guys that Cougar fans, we typically ignore tight ends. I think us as Cougar fans should really pay attention to the tight end room this year.
I did not pick Malik Carr, but Malik Carr was one I thought about a lot for this. I remember when I was looking at him when it was announced that he was going to be transferring to U of H. Not that I'm like, oh, why would he come here? But they had a staff change at Michigan State. Mel Tucker was let go. Some really not great stuff against him mid-season there, and they hired Oregon State's head coach Jonathan Smith, not U of H head coach or U of H quarterback Donovan Smith, Jonathan Smith. And I was kind of surprised. Wow, I'm surprised the new staff didn't more aggressively try to hold on to him. That's how I think good his resume was at MSU. I picked a receiver for this one, Marquise Shoulders, one of the new guys. He joined the Cougs after starting his career at Tulsa as a Houston area kid from the Northwest side. I think is instantly going to be one of this team's go-to weapons in the passing game. I'm not going to go game by game through his Tulsa career, but I did talk with our AAC friends at the Golden Hurricast, great Tulsa pod, great friends of our show, and they were convinced that if Shoulders hadn't gone out early last season, the 5th game, that he would have been a star for that team. I think you can kind of call this one a vibes pick, Bobby. He's not the biggest guy, but he's quick, and kind of when I picture U of H receiver in my mind's eye, I picture a guy like Marquis Shoulders, like a bit smaller but shifty and fast, will play, I think play hungry, like play, guys who are bigger recruits.
A little bit of a chip on his shoulder.
A little bit of chip on his shoulder, no pun intended there. I think he's going to be one of the team's best consistent deep threats in the passing game, even as we all expect this to be a more run-focused offense. I mean, I think ideally Manjack and a more prominently used tight end like Malik Carr are the guys you kind of utilize to move the sticks in the short and intermediate range. And you have guys like Makai Muse probably in that group as well. And then you have Shoulders and Stephon Johnson that can maybe take the top off your opposing defenses, so to speak. So Shoulders is my pick here, though. I think Rashawn Sanford is going to earn himself more carries than maybe your average redshirt freshman does with no college experience. I think if UH didn't have two fairly established guys in Parker Jenkins and Stacey Snead, I might have actually picked him over Shoulders here. But I think Shoulders is my pick for this one. But I think there's a lot of right answers to this question.
Yeah, I like that answer a lot. I think, we are talking a lot how this offense is going to run the ball more, but I do think this team is going to pass as well. A lot of things that you've seen from that Fritz offense is you kind of run to set up the pass. They have no problem taking the top off when they need to, going deep or explosive plays. I think a lot of their explosive plays and their offense have come on getting playmakers the ball in that intermediate and just letting the playmakers make plays. So I think that's a really good answer. He's a guy who looks like he could be a playmaker who can they'll get the ball to him in space and he can house it if he needs to.
Exactly.
All right, so let me ask you. We got to talk about the elephant in the room here. I'm sure our answers are probably the same on this one, but I'm going to start and ask you, what is your biggest position of concern on this offense?
Offensive line.
Yeah.
That's a pretty easy answer to that question. I think the one both of us have there. I guess we should dig into why that's the case. Because we've talked a lot of this offense and we have talked a lot of different parts of this offense. We've not talked about a single offensive lineman, and we haven't really talked about that because it's such a question mark, man. I mean, you lost a guy who's now on the Miami Dolphins roster, and Patrick Paul. I think even if you returned every guy who could have returned to the roster, just Patrick Paul being in the NFL alone was going to make this unit more of a question mark going into the 2024 season. You also, graduate Jack Freeman. Don't think I put him in the same category as Patrick Paul, but was a good leader, multi-year starter at a difficult position like center. You have one of the better recruits in recent program history, and Demetrius Hunter likely coming in to replace him. But we're talking about a player who's only seen, little Division I action, replacing a very veteran starter and doing so at what'll, on the balance, be probably the toughest regular season schedule this program has played since the Southwest Conference collapsed. I mean, so one of the guys who transferred, Tyler Johnson, transfers to Colorado. And that's kind of one of your overlooked losses, I think, from this offseason. I don't think Johnson's an all-conference caliber offensive lineman, at least not in the Big 12. But I also think if you put him back in this U of H roster right now, that he's your best offensive lineman, and I don't think it would be a very difficult pick. Right now, your only returning guy with real established starting experience is Tank Jenkins, and I'm grateful he chose to finish his college career at the University of Houston, but he'll have to noticeably improve to be a positive difference maker at this level. So that's my concern. There are interesting transfers that come in there, but this is the hardest position to mesh quickly, and it hasn't been the level of transfer where you're like, oh yeah, that guy is going to for sure come in and be a good Big 12 starter. They might, but it is a question mark. That's the two-word phrase I keep coming back to, Bobby, question marks.
Yeah, for me, obviously it's going to be O-line. I think if you can square away the O-line this year, I think we're going to see an offense that's going to be really good. But even Willie Fritz is concerned about this O-line. They've asked him about it, and he's basically responded, I don't know. It's going to be our best five. We're going to play the best five linemen. We're going to put them out there and kind of see what happens. And that doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me as a fan. You kind of made a point. You made this point that it's not easy to have a cohesive unit, and you don't really plug and play offensive linemen. And I'm afraid that we're going to have our best 5, but they're not going to have positions, right? You're just going to have guys shuffling around, and this game you're going to play left guard. This game you're going to play right guard. You're
not a recipe for success.
Yeah, and it just feels like that's what's going to happen. Somebody's going to tweak a knee, and they're going to have to sit out a couple of games, and you're going to move somebody from left guard to right guard. You're going to move the center to left guard. You're going to bring in a new center, whatever it looks like. You're probably not last in a new center. That's one of the last ones you'll change, that in left tackle. But either way, the point here is, like, you'll have a guy who is naturally a tackle, a guy who has played tackle his whole life, is built like a tackle, has the athleticism of a tackle, because, you want your guards and your centers to be a little bit leaner, a little bit more able to pull, and a little more agile. That's the word I was looking for. Well, if you pull a guy who's built to play tackle, you bring him over, and now he's got to play guard, and now you have a guy playing tackle who should be playing tackle, but a guy who should be playing tackle playing guard. There's just not going to be a lot of cohesion in that, and that's very, very concerning as a fan. And you're implementing a new offense. You got 5 guys who can just shuffle around, and if one of them gets hurt or anything like that, or needs a break, you're going to see guys moving around, and this offense, I think, is going to be complicated yet simple, if that makes sense. Like, there's going to be reads for the quarterback and things like that, but for the O-line, it's a zone blocking scheme is what he's run a lot of times, and so you're going to have to learn how to zone block and do things like that, and your assignment on one play is at right guard is going to be way different than your assignment on left guard. And you got to remember, where am I playing right now? What is my assignment on this? It just feels like it can get very, very complicated when you're just shuffling guys around like that.
Wanted to mention several of the veteran transfers that come in. Dakota White, I really like the addition of him from Louisiana Tech, was a multi-year starter there, a local guy coming to finish his college career at U of H. Is probably one of your starting tackles come week 1, but there's a big step up in competition from going to Conference USA to the Big 12. A couple of guys in Cedric Melton and Jake Wiley, who both played for P4 programs, Ole Miss and Colorado/UCLA. Wiley had 2 stops respectively, but neither of those guys saw enough of the field that you feel rock solid about them winning a starting job and being an above average contributor here. Caden Bowie, really interesting guy, Bobby, ran with the first team offensive line in spring ball. At that point, you're like, okay, well, maybe that's just necessity. Maybe that's just they're trying a lot of guys in spring ball. But from everything I've heard, has been consistently a first team guy, positive difference maker in fall camp. So it's exciting to have a couple younger guys who can anchor this line for the foreseeable future in Bowie and Demetrius Hunter. But also, interior offensive line is maybe the position I have the most heartburn about seeing a redshirt freshman or redshirt sophomore, both of whom have minimal on-field experience, playing next to each other in a good conference against a much tougher level of competition we've ever seen in a 12-game regular season schedule. Not to beat that point to death. I mean, I think we've talked about it a few times now. The offense will benefit from a clearer vision all around that extends the offensive line. Asking a new scheme to overcome one returning offensive lineman and a number of guys who weren't on the roster last year, probably making fairly big contributions, I think is asking a bit much in year 1 of Willie Fritz. I don't hate that 3 of the first 4 games this season are to varying degrees winnable. I mean, this isn't a friendly schedule in the balance, but Rice, UNLV, and Cincy in 3 of your first 4 games, it's not the worst. Like those are teams where the defense is probably the second best unit. In Cincy's case, they've lost nearly their entire defensive line in fall ball in the offseason to various injuries and ailments. So might be a little bit of a soft landing there, but not going to be much of that this year. I think that's I think that's everything, Bobby. Any other points you want to hit on the Cougar offense while we're on the topic?
No, man. I am ready to talk about not just football, but football.
But before we talk Cougar football, Cougar football, FUTBOL, we have a really exciting interview. One that Bobby and I just did a bit earlier with. No, you're good. You're good. I had the transition all queued up in my head here. Really interesting guy. Was U of H staffer, was in player personnel, which is a very new part of what college staffs do now. It's expanding, it's changing. I think I mentioned in our interview, Bobby, the book Meat Market, a really great book about recruiting by Bruce Feldman, where we talked about like the staff and how the assistant coaches were basically the recruiting staff. Now you have an entire department of people for recruiting, for scouting, and Martin gives us a really good, good insight into scouting. A really cool story himself. I said this in our interview, but I'm going to link to his Medium piece about being on staff in the last days of the previous staff at U of H after Holgerson was let go, and kind of that experience. That was a really fun, unique read, like not something you're going to read anywhere else. I think one of the more interesting things I've read about college football this year. So you give us a listen to Bobby and I talking to Martin Marroquin. We're very excited to welcome to the Scott and Holland podcast for the first time tonight a guy with a really interesting story, Martin Marroquin, former assistant director of scouting at the University of Houston alum. Martin, thank you for taking a little time out of your night to talk to us.
No problem. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I think you have a really interesting story, kind of like I alluded to at the top there. Just kind of give us the story as detailed or service levels you want to about how you ended up working in college football player personnel and how you ended up on the University of Houston staff.
Sure. So I was in the military for 9 years in the Navy. I worked in the nuclear power field. I was on a sub for half of that time. So naturally, football made sense, getting out of the military. My plan after the military was to do electrical engineering or something like that because it made sense. But my wife was like, you don't want to do that. See how things go while you're a student at U of H. Maybe you can intern. I got lucky. I was actually, the day that I was going to go to St. Thomas to do my internship for school, Casey Smithson, currently the DPP there, called me and was like, do you want to help with the football team? It's like, of course. So I didn't do the St. Thomas thing. Sorry, St. Thomas. And I helped U of H. 2 years later, after working for free, they offered me a position. And yeah, I mean that's really how I ended up there. Loved sports all my life. I played basketball, but football growing up in Texas was obviously number one. And I always wanted to work on the other side of the curtain, see how things work, building a team. Played NCAA like anybody else who loves college football growing up, recruiting, that's the lifeblood of a program, but, all that stuff, what we enjoy as sports nerds, really. I mean, there's not a better way to put it. And I got the opportunity to do that, so that was cool.
Yeah, so you wrote an interesting article on Medium called So You Want to Work in College Football, where you kind of talked about some of the different things that happened after the transition from Holgerson. So, you talked a little bit about it in the article, but for those that haven't read, what were some of the last weeks on staff like after Holgerson was let go as one of the few staffers that were left in the building? Yeah,
so just to kind of give an idea, early in the season when we had the game against Rice, we were all biting our nails, worried that it might be over then. Just internally, right? Nobody said anything to us, but it was just like we just lost to Rice.
Just get vibes.
Started out bad. Right, yeah. Yeah. So, we were all kind of walking on eggshells as the rest of the season went. It was a roller coaster, with the rest, as you guys experience it, in the building, we experience all those same things. It's just, our paychecks are dependent on it. But yeah, so it was a normal week. We were kind of, Cancun chance might have been going on because we knew we weren't going to play in a bowl game at that point after the Cincinnati loss. But, for us, myself and TJ Randall, the director of scouting at the time, who's now at Auburn, we did our job like normal on Sunday after that game, after the Cincinnati game. We met with both sides of the ball, did the scouting report for UCF as the week went on. Sorry about that. Normal week, maybe watching some players here and there, maybe, pre-portaling, not talking to guys to get in the portal, but just maybe some guys might enter the portal. We're scouting them, getting prepared for that. Watching the game on Saturday at home because they were in Florida for the UCF game. Didn't get good vibe from the game, obviously. We were a little worried, but internally we were like, well, they're not going to let Dana go yet. They're going to give him another year. Fertitta had said, they still had hope. We'll give him another year, give him some time to get going first year in the Big 12. And then that day just felt eerie. Like after the game, we were like, oh no, man. And, we were all talking like, I don't know, we'll see what happens. And then the Duarte tweet is actually how we all found out that it went down. Myself, TJ Randall, Rajesh Murthy, who's at TCU now, we were all like, yeah, Duarte tweet came in. I guess we didn't know we had a job at that point, but we met as a staff then. Corby Meekins was the interim for that weird period of time. And, you know, from then we were just kind of like in a lull. But like I say in the story, myself and TJ, we were like, well, we still got a job to do. The portal's still going to open. Some guys were getting in. So that was honestly, it's weird because it was the most questioning time I had, most unsure time I had in my career, but it was the most fun because we saw a player we liked, we just called him and offered him. It was really simple. There was no coaches to discuss it with because we didn't know who was going to be a coach. But we knew when the new staff showed up, we had to be able to present, hey, these are the guys we've been scouting. These are the guys we've discussed potentially playing here. Maybe an NIL number they threw at us that they need to be prepared for. So it was really cool. I mean, we threw out like 30 to 40 offers in that week. And fans were actually tweeting, like, who is offering these guys? Like, we don't even have a coach. And, yeah, that was like a lot of it was I watch a guy. I tell TJ I like him. And he's like, all right, I'll call him. You know, he was obviously watching guys himself too. But it was that simple.
Wow.
So to that process, this is something like Bobby and I, ages and ages, like we've kind of been following this. I think the first one, Bobby, was you were at Meet Market by Bruce Feldman, right?
Yeah. I was the one who introduced you to Meet Market.
Yeah, that's right. You got it's almost 20 years ago now, but it's where Bruce Feldman embeds with the Ole Miss staff, which was known at the time, and like I'm sure that is like hilariously outdated now for what modern day recruiting operations, certainly a modern day recruiting operation the SEC does, but it's something Bobby and I have always been very fascinated with. So this is, I'm really interested your answer to this. Just kind of take me generally through the scouting process, the offer process, in a more normal scenario than the last few weeks on staff. Like, what was your yeah, exactly.
So, there's not. I mean, I guess there's a science to it, but there's really not. We're looking at lists. There's databases that exist, whether it's ARMS, Exos. There's a few others that I can't think of because those are the only two that I have experience with. And it's just a database of players. And we'll just go through, we'll filter names based on sometimes criteria, or just like, here's the grade that this specific database gives the kid, and we'll watch kids. I mean, hundreds of kids a week. And you kind of have to take a break because everybody just starts to look the same. But so we'll watch a kid. At least for the last season at Houston on Tuesdays, we would meet as a specific recruiting staff, like DPP, assistant DPPs, and ourselves as a scouting department. And we would watch, 20 players or so on that Tuesday to prepare for our offensive and defensive recruiting meetings that week to have players to present to them like, hey, this is a kid we need to offer. He's got such and such offers. It may be a 26 kid for last year, right? A couple years out, but if we need to get in on this now because pretty soon he's going to be a 4-star, 5-star. Keyshawn Henderson, for example, might have been one of those kids. I'm not saying he was, but that kind of scenario when you're watching a 26 quarterback and it's like, if we don't get in now, by the time we do, he's going to have Alabama and such, whoever it may be. So for like high school kids, I would say that's the process. Go to these databases, maybe go through schools that we frequent, areas that we frequent, and try to find them that way. And of course, there's like the springtime when the coaches actually go out to their areas and go to the high schools or JUCOs or and watch kids, and they bring back notes and say, really like this kid, watch this film. I like his practice habits. Or he was 6'5", 240, and he's 15 years old. We need to be in, stuff like that. A lot of it is coaches telling us, I'm going to keep going back to the school. I need to know that this kid can play. So the next time I'm out there, I can offer, or just tell me to watch his film right now. I'll offer him right now. Like I'm at the school, or, legally, of course, whatever, when they're allowed to be there. So that's probably the JUCO high school way that it goes about offering generally. And then for transfer portal, there's a NCAA site, and it's just constantly uploading, the kids as they hit the portal. And so we'll kind of have an idea of who we want to look at that might hit the portal. Good schools are doing it already. Good schools already have a list of kids that when they hit the portal, they're going to be prepared to offer them and not watch their film. They're going to know, especially schools with bigger resources. And so, you're looking for the kid to hit. Maybe the kid told you or said on Twitter, I plan on hitting the portal when I can. So you watch his film, then you're like, all right, this kid can play for us. Right now, you show the coaches, I'm like, all right, cool. Let us know when he's legally in the portal in that NCAA database, and contact him and we'll offer him.
Yeah, so you talked about how you kind of are you see somebody and you send them off to the coaches. So what are just kind of some universal things that you looked for when you're evaluating a prospect? And I know it's going to differ position by position, right? But what were some of the things that you just kind of looked for?
Yeah, I mean, for lack of a better term, a lot of it initially is eye test or that boy nice. Really is. I mean, like kids pop off the screen, and it's that simple. If there's a corner, he's 6'4", but he can, stay in line and phase with a kid that's 5'9" and run with him down the field. Hey, we need to watch this kid. Or you turn on the screen. There's a guy, Markel Bell, ended up going to Miami. He was at a JUCO in Mississippi. I watched this film because it was time to watch JUCO kids, and JUCOs will ask them, who do we need to watch? And he was on the top of their list. I put him on. He's 6'8", like 340. Like, okay, coaches need to see this guy. I don't really need to see much, 1 or 2 plays. Cool. Coaches need to watch this guy. And so like, that's what's going to stand out. How big they are they faster than everybody else? Dimensions are important. Are they fast? Like I said, can you see the production on screen? And then from there, you do a little more research, like what kind of competition is he playing? Like, is it a kid in a town in Texas that I've never even heard of and I'm from Texas? Okay, well, who's he playing against? And then when you watch him, does he get to the point where he's off the screen because he's so much faster than these kids? Okay, then he's doing what he should against lesser competition. I would say you're like the where you start, and then from there, it's where the coaches get to know about the kid. Maybe they know a guy at the school, they ask questions, stuff like that. But for me, in the scouting realm, I just want to know if he can play football.
How did you, or was your level the level where you evaluated to scheme fit versus raw measurables? Like, how much of each of those things was there? Because obviously there are extreme examples. Like you said, 6'8", 340 offensive lineman at a decently high level. Like, okay, that checks a lot of the boxes just 1 or 2 plays into watching him. But what was kind of the mix of that when you were debating, who to pass along or,
Right.
who might be offerable in the future?
I'm sure it depends on who the coaches are, what scheme they run. But I know that working with Doug Belk, he liked to know that guys could cover man in the secondary. So if I watch a kid and all he's doing is dropping in the zone, it's a little tougher. He's got to have the measurables that they believe they can transfer to playing man. So scheme is it matters if you see that a kid can't do it. But it doesn't necessarily, if you've never seen him do it, but he has, he runs a 10-200 and he's 6'1", 200 pounds playing corner in high school. You're kind of like, well, I think I can make this work. We'll try it and see how it goes. And if he doesn't work at corner, we'll move him to safety or make him a line. They'll take a chance on a kid based on measurables and speed and stuff like that. Scheme, I would say, matters more when you're looking at a guy you're looking to play right away, like a transfer kid. So if it's a guy that's been in a system where he's only playing zone for 2-3 years and you need a corner that can play man and start for you right now, you're probably not going to go after that kid. But with high school, you're willing to take more chances just because the scheme it's relative, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. You're more concerned with measurables and ability.
Okay, so kind of going on that, we touched on this a little bit, but what were the differences in evaluating D1 transfers, JUCO, and high school, right? You talked a little bit about scheme, that kind of stuff, but obviously, to me as an outsider, I'm going to look at a D1 transfer a lot differently than I'm going to look at a high school kid. One is more projectable. So what was that evaluating like?
Yeah, it's what you're saying makes sense. Logic does apply, thankfully.
Okay.
Sometimes. But yeah, high school kid, you're projecting. You're projecting position because a kid might be playing corner and he's not going to play corner for you, but you still want him to play for your football team. So you're looking at measurables, speed, size, things like that.
Okay.
With JUCO kids, you're probably looking at a guy that can help you 2 seasons out because they've been at a JUCO program clearly good football players, but they probably need a year in your strength and conditioning program to get to the physical level that you want them to be, where they can handle playing at this level and be in the shape you need them to be in. And then you get to see how their body handles just being at the program. Now, if you're lucky, you'll get a kid who steps in right away. Of course, you're never going to turn away that opportunity. But you temper your expectations a little bit with the JUCO kid, and not to put a blanket mark on them, but they might be at JUCO because school was an issue, or off the field stuff, or lack of resources at the small high school they were at. So they just need to adapt to a situation that's going to be, maybe the lights are too bright initially, because even at U of H, right, it's the developing program. It's still bigger than even the best JUCO in the country, obviously. And then D1 transfers. You're looking for a guy that's either going to be on the field in some capacity right away or starting, in my opinion. Of course, it's not that simple. Everybody wants the guys that can start for them. And the transfer portal is the Wild West. Guys that we thought could start for us, schools that were playing in the playoff were offering for depth. So it's like, well, what the hell are we supposed to do? How do we get anybody to play here? It's tough. But I would say you're looking at a transfer guy to contribute immediately. Unless they're like super young, and you recruited them out of high school, but you were number 2, and after their freshman year they decided to transfer and you managed to pull them in, then it's a little bit different. But for the most part, you're looking for, I think, a chance to inject immediate production with a transfer kid.
What are the biggest misconceptions that your average college football fan has about what goes into recruiting and evaluating and building a college football team's roster?
Yeah, I would say number one, and I made sure to ask some of my ex-colleagues and people that I know that work in the business that I was on track with this one, but we don't really care about the recruiting rankings. Of course, at the end of the year, it's nice to say we're number such and such at the end with the class we put together, but we're not going to recruit a kid because 24/7 or On 3 says they're a 4-star. That doesn't necessarily matter to us. Now that they do a good job of projecting who are the best players in the country, like the 5-stars are supposed to be, they're projecting out the first round picks from that class. Essentially, it's what a 5-star is supposed to be. But y'all are going to ask me in a bit about who I think is going to be an impact player. And like, for example, Rayshon Sanford was not a 4-star recruit, but I think most schools in the country would be happy to have a kid like that. And he was a 3-star, but we recruited him. We were just as invested in getting him as Parker Jenkins. Parker's more all-around back, bigger body, but those are two guys that are going to contribute, and one's a 4-star, one's a 3-star. But we don't care about that. When we're presenting him to a coach, he's not like, well, what's his one? Where's he rank in the top 100? It just doesn't matter. It's not relevant to the process of scouting a player, because like I said, the kid might be a 3-star, but we value him as a kid who can immediately help in some way. And the recruiting rankings fluctuate based on where a kid ends up. There's rumors that this happens, and you can kind of see it with certain kids, but I think this happened to Pancake, Demetrius Hunter, the year that he decommitted from Oklahoma. He was a 4-star recruit, and then when he switched to commit to U of H, I want to say he was all of a sudden a 3-star recruit, but nothing about his film had changed. It's just weird. That's all I'm going to say, and I can't confirm that because things change, and I don't know if the internet footprint is gonna show what I'm saying to be true, but it rankings can fluctuate based on where a kid ends up like that. So that's why the rankings are so irrelevant to us. It's nice to say at the end of the year, like I said, we were the number 30 recruiting class in the country. We can put that on a flyer and send it out to a kid so that they know that they're coming to a good school that recruits good players. But it's just not where we start, with a kid. And on that note, to continue, a kid might have been a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, but once they hit the transfer portal, they're not a 4-star recruit anymore. None of that matters, because now they've been in college, and it didn't work out for them wherever they were. They're still, we don't value, they're not valued as a 4-star recruit anymore. that's washed once you step on campus.
All right, so you alluded to this, but who do you think, somebody that Cougar fans may not necessarily think of, that is going to be an impact player for the Cougs this year?
So Ray Sean, for sure. Ray, he's a good kid, so you want to see him do well. So he recovered well. I mean, he attacked his injury last year. We were all devastated. I feel like I jinxed him because I was telling people in the building he was going to have a 60-yard touchdown at some point last season. And once he saw the field, I mean, he's just super dynamic. And I feel the same way this year. Like I said, he attacked recovery. He's going to be healthy. He's going to see the field. Because unfortunately, the team was dealing with a bunch of injuries, which is really heartbreaking to see for these kids the last couple of days. So, I mean, that's immediately going to give him an opportunity to see the field, which I think he was going to get anyway. But he's going to be impactful. Parker's the bell cow. Parker Jenkins is the guy. But Ray's going to be impactful as well in the backfield. I think Latrell McCutcheon, maybe people forgot about him because, he had to sit out a year, but I got to watch him for a year in practice, and I mean, he stood out as the best corner last year. And I was Isaiah Hamilton's number one fan. But I think Latrell's just as good, maybe better, longer. He's going to be a really good player. It's really disappointing that Isaiah moved on. Good for him. I'm happy that he thinks he got a better opportunity, and I'm happy to see him move on to something he thinks is better for himself. Hopefully, he does well, and we see him on Sundays at some point. But would have been nice to see them as a duo. But I think Latrell McCutcheon's going to have a good year. Hershey McLaurin, I don't know if Cougar fans really know that name. He's a kid that transferred in from West Virginia. Scouting West Virginia, he's a kid that stood out to me as like, man, if you ever had we had the opportunity to get a kid like this. He's versatile, long, can come up and play near the line of scrimmage, can play safety, really very rangy. I'm excited to see what he does. I'm not in the building every day, so I don't really know what his playing time is going to look like, but I'd be shocked if he didn't see the field regularly just because of his versatility.
Martin, that was absolutely fantastic. You have a very interesting story. I'm bad at doing this historically, but I've made a post. I'm going to link your Medium story, the one we talked about earlier, because it is one of the more interesting things I've read about college football, the subject this year. Not trying to blow smoke here. It's a new perspective, and it is a perspective I'm glad we got to devote a little time to the podcast tonight. So really appreciate your time. Where can the people find you on social media and your writing and any of that stuff?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, Medium is where I do the writing when I do it, when I'm not, busy watching my daughter. Social media is going to be Marroquin on all platforms, MAHROWKEEN, and Twitter, Instagram. I think that's it. But also want to shout out Holly Anderson from the Shutdown Fullcast. I slid in her DMs hoping to get an opportunity for a job after I got fired. And she tried to help me out, but she was the reason that I wrote this story. I told her what was going on. We think we're going to get let go. Do you have any ideas of where I can potentially get a writing job? And then she said, you should just write this. People want to know about this. I didn't think anybody cared because I'm not an offensive coordinator or somebody who's getting fired. And she's like, no, this is a new perspective. You should write this. People would want to read this. So if it wasn't for her, I would have never written the story. So want to, send that out there that I appreciate her time. And the guys from Split Zone Duo were really nice too. They helped me out a bit. Really good podcast. And Holly Anderson's writing thing that she does with Spencer Hall channel 6. I was gonna say I'm gonna subscribe and I'm gonna get the name of this wrong. I give them money. I'm gonna butcher this. So no, yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, thanks again, Martin, for joining us tonight. Yeah, thanks for having me,
sir.
Bobby, we have Cougar Sports back literally tomorrow. We record this on the 14th. There's going to be a Cougar sporting event that counts for reels in about 22 hours. That's really exciting. Cougar soccer season here, the regular curtain opener of the U of H athletics season. So we're kind of do this sort of in a similar-ish format to football. We're going to talk through some discussion points about the team and kind of give you the lowdown of what Cougar soccer we expect to look like in the coming season. Does that sound good to you, friend?
Let's do it.
So the first point I want to kick around here, kind of big picture narrative. I like to with any sports team, U of H or otherwise, like what's the big picture narrative around this team, and the big picture narrative around head coach Jaime Frias, who's going into, I think, a pretty critical third year as head coach of this program. He joined here with a really, really sparkling resume as, both working in the U.S. women's national team game, was an assistant for some high level programs, was also a smaller college head coach. So you figure, okay, that checks the box of has worked a place where he doesn't have a ton of resources, but has also seen how a high level college soccer program operates, has also worked with the national team side, as well as I take a big sip of water, excuse me. And just hasn't happened the first 2 seasons. And I think the success of his predecessor, Frias, is why I'm grading a bit harshly here. It did take a while for Diego Bocanegra to get things going, but by his last 2 seasons, U of H was one of the better women's soccer programs in the AAC, which was at the time of U of H's kind of brief ascendance, a good multi-bid to the postseason women's soccer league. So if I'm judging Frias harshly, is because he didn't inherit the absolute worst AAC program like his predecessor did. He inherited one that was, quite honestly, I think, shafted from not being in the 2021 postseason field. And UH has been almost dead last in their conferences the last 2 seasons, despite returning a good percentage of players from those teams. But to get to the answer to this question, though, I think narrative-wise, this needs to be the season where U of H shows an ability to do better than being one of the bottom-rung teams in their league. The Big 12 is a solid women's soccer conference, but it's not the level of it in, say, volleyball or men's and women's hoops in terms of where the Big 12 is as compared to the sport writ large here. Like, it is not a league where it's like, oh, well, you're going to get absolutely killed by the level of competition. It's like, well, a lot of these teams in this league, though unfortunately U of H misses a lot of them this year on the schedule, a lot of these teams aren't that good at women's soccer. Like, you could probably not be that great and still be like lower middle of the standings, which unfortunately this program wasn't. So I think, long story short, 2024 is a put up or shut up kind of season. Not put up or shut up in the sense of, oh, this team needs to make the NCAA tournament. I really think Frias gets a 4th season next year regardless, but this roster is now almost entirely recruited by this staff. And I think now that you've had multiple seasons of recruiting, off season implementing your system, style of play, everything a coaching staff does, this is the season we need to start seeing better than near the bottom of the conference results, I think. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're asking kind of where he stands and things like that, it's not great, right? But it is going into year 3. I certainly agree that he's going to get a year 4. Last year, very inflated by playing bad teams, and it's not really going to change this year either. Let's be honest. Looking at the schedule, this program confuses me. Our soccer program confuses me. And it's because there's a ton of, it's one of the most mind-boggling ones in our athletic department. There is so much soccer talent in the greater Houston area and in the state of Texas, and it just cannot get off the ground for whatever reason. It's had some moments, to your point, but overall, this program has just not been one that we've seen a lot of success. So I really hope Coach Frias can do something this year. I think it is very much a year where he's going to have to show the progression. Maybe not make the tournament or do something like that, but you are going to have to show the progression that this program is headed in the right direction.
Yeah, so I'd say we should get to know the key contributors for this season as well. The one thing you could say in favor of this team, they were returning a ton of production from a season ago, and a lot of those returners were first-year players in the program last season. In a couple of cases, first-year college players, period. Your top 5 minutes played leaders are back for this year's team. That group doesn't even include your lone preseason all-conference selection, sophomore Ariana Jimison, or last year's goals leader, junior Cameron Maddox. I felt like I spent a lot of the opening topic being kind of gloomy about how his head coach inherited a good program, and we've had 2 not very good seasons so far. I think the positive case for this team overachieving that low preseason ranking is just that absurd amount of returning production. Returning production from a not very good team is not a guarantee of anything, but last year's team had so many stars and rotation players who were in their first year in the program. And in that sense, this is a much more experienced team. And it's experienced at all levels. You have Olivia Dietrich back in goal. Last season was her first season really seeing any kind of on-field Division I action after redshirting her first season at Texas Tech. Alex Whitcraft, who's a 2-year starter, started every match he's played in the last 2 seasons, her first 2 collegiate seasons. You also have Jada Gibson, Anna Reza, and Sophie Weber, all defensive players who started a bunch of games from last season who are back. Lainey Gonzalez comes in as an interesting experienced transfer. I'll get to her with the other transfers later, but you have up front Cameron Max and KK Kaiser returning as well. And then your preseason all-conference pick Jimison in the midfield, along with returning starters Alexis Folks and Juliet Moore. And 2 other intriguing transfers I'll talk about more a little bit later, Jordan Johnson from LSU and Jocelyn Alonso from Memphis. I didn't just mention a bunch of names there just to mention them. There's just a ton of returning experience there and players who have at least flashed ability to be a positive difference maker at the college level. As rough as the last 2 seasons have been at times, if you want to see a plan behind the lumps of the last 2 seasons, it's now having experienced roster athletes who have now played together a full year and got the benefit of that. Now, can this group win against quality competition? I think that's a fair unanswered question.
Yeah, I mean, there's, to your point, you pretty much said it all. A lot of returning. I mean, you return your top 2 scorers, so that is always a good thing to have on your roster. Bringing back your 2 top scorers is something that is going to lead you to success, hopefully. So, not that you needed me to tell you that is a good thing to return your top 2 scorers, but I'm trying not to repeat exactly what you said while saying exactly what you said, right? Because I think it was their first year in the program for a lot of people. And we talk about how you got to build a program, you got to build it up, Part of that is getting players used to playing in your system and being used to how you do your off-season workouts and things like that. And I think this is, again, a put up or shut up kind of season where this is where you start to lose the excuses. You can no longer say, oh, I have a roster full of first-year players and they're my players and they're going to learn the right. This is the year to kind of take it to the next step.
I looked at it. Alex Whitcraft was the only player I mentioned by name who was even in the program before last season of all those standout players. So it's not just you're returning a bunch of players who now have that experience of playing together. You were playing a bunch of first-year, like you're really betting on youth, and you retain those players. And I think, curious to see what it looks like. It's the $64,000 question. I set this next question up knowing kind of my answer to it, but I really do think my question is like, what is the one thing that this team can do that's fairly straightforward that would drastically improve their prospects of this coming season? Bobby, this team was so bad defending a lead late in Big 12 play last season.
Exactly what I have.
They dropped. I did the math. So I'll go through them. 3 Big 12 matches, the Cougs could have doubled their points total in conference play if they hadn't conceded goals in the final 20 minutes of those matches. You had OU, you were up 1-0 in that one, conceded in the 74th and 82nd minutes to lose 2-1 at Iowa State. Grabbed a 1-0 lead early in the second half, only to lose the lead after conceding a goal in the 72nd, and then 86th minute to lose 2-1. And then the season finale against Baylor, you got to 2-2 in that one before allowing a goal in the final 10 minutes to ultimately lose that one.
All 3 of those were 10 minutes, not just 20 minutes, right?
I'm including the tying. I'm including the tying ones too.
Yeah, for sure. But you gave up goals that surrendered leads in the 10 minutes. It's oh gosh.
That's to not get too sidetracked here, but I'm a Dynamo fan, and most of the last 12 years of being a Dynamo fan has just been seeing how they find creative ways to concede late goals. I was at a concert 2 years ago now. It was 2022. It was Katy Perry's residency out here in Vegas play. And I'm not someone who's on my phone at concerts very much. I take a picture here and there, but I really do try to not be one of those people that's holding up their phone the entire time. But there was one song, I want to say it was Roar, but she wanted everyone to take their phone lights out. So I did. And so I had the phone screen facing me. And in the time that song played, the Dynamo surrendered the game tying and game losing goals to lose to the Vancouver Whitecaps on the road. And I wasn't paying attention, but I remember just bringing my phone down and seeing the alert, Van goal 90-1, and just being it's my lot in life to watch this team blow. And that was my lot in life last season. The Cougar soccer, they were so I think at least 2 of those 3. I texted Dustin and be is this team going to finally win a road game? and just them not finding a way to
ball sort of.
Yeah. Signs point to late conceded goal. And it's too simple to say though, oh, Frias and staff should just tell the players to stop conceding late goals. Doesn't work like that. I'm sure the staff is way more qualified than me to diagnose and fix these problems. To their credit, the best result the team got last season was them actually, getting a tie with some late match heroics against TCU, a top 25 program on the road. But if this team can just close out matches better than they did last season, we're going to be talking about a team with at least somewhat improved record against a very difficult schedule than the one we saw a season ago. Like and we're going to get to it. I know what the schedule is. I'm not expecting 6-7 wins against. I just want to see this team not blow leads late and compete in the matches that they should be competitive in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what I had. The other very simple answer that I also wrote down is just score more. If you look at the Big 12 scores, it was a lot of 0-1 goal games, right? Where the Cougs just weren't scoring. I wonder how much you can attribute, because to your point, gave up a lot of late goals, conceded a lot of late goals, but didn't score very late in goals or late in games either. Kind of once the 65th minute hit, it felt like it just kind of dropped off for the Lady Cougars. So it's I think scoring more and maybe just getting better at the end of the game, just overall, not just defensively but offensively as well.
I'm just imagining Jaime Frias like a big notebook being like, do you score more goals? This Bobby guy is really onto something. They're just going to say, oh, I shouldn't concede late, of course. It's like these effing idiots. I alluded to this earlier. I think there are a few intriguing players. I think the good news being a lot less of them because there's the need for it because you have so much return experience. But there are a few really interesting transfer players that I'd like to zoom in on briefly here.
How about it?
If you don't mind. I think I mentioned all of them in passing earlier, but really wanted to highlight a trio of interesting transfers that I think complement that high level of returning experience that we talked about a bit earlier. Junior defender Lainey Gonzalez and super senior midfielder George Johnson, who both come from the LSU program, and senior midfielder Jocelyn Alonso comes in from Memphis. Worth noting, LSU has been a good SEC program that's gone to the last two NCAA tournaments, and Memphis, I would say, probably the most consistently very good AAC program. Annually in the NCAAs, annually top 25. Like, they're not a quote-unquote power program, but they are one of the surest bets to be in the women's soccer postseason tournament. And to different degrees, all three of them played a good amount for those programs. This isn't a situation where, they came into this good program because they were evaluated to be really good high school players, but got to the college level and just found that program to be below their depth. They all played a fair amount. Gonzalez probably played the least of the trio, and she played in 29 games the past 2 seasons at LSU and started 2 in the most recent completed season. Johnson started 7 games last year for LSU, started multiple games each of the 4 seasons that she was in the Tigers program. And I think Alonso is the most intriguing player of that group. Started every game of her first 2 seasons with the Memphis program, earned all conference honors of some kind. Both those years was AAC All-Rookie in 2021 and was second team All-Conference in 2022. I don't know if it was an injury or getting stuck behind a better player, but she played a lot less in 2023, only started 4 of the 11 games she featured in, has 12 goals and 10 assists in her first 2 seasons at Memphis, scored multiple game-winning goals during their 2021 postseason run. If U of H takes a big step forward this year, Bobby, and finishes better than the preseason projections, I think this trio of transfers, especially Alonso, will have played a big part in why that happened.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on the big 3. I agree with you wholeheartedly. So excited for Cougar soccer. Excited to see if this program can actually take the step forward that we hope it does.
So last point here, what are this team's most critical games? And I don't think this is a question of who the best opponents are in the schedule, but which games the Cougs really need to get a positive result or do better than maybe the expectations are for them. Openers tomorrow against UT Austin. I, hope dearly to be wrong on this one, but I think they're projected to be better than they were last year. And last year's UT Austin team in Houston beat the Cougs 6-1, and it was a 6-1 that if you looked at the numbers, that's probably a pretty fair result on the balance there. Again, would love to be wrong. We'll be following along tomorrow night when they play the opener in Austin, but not feeling wild about the Cougs' chances. But And non-conference, I think you alluded to early, non-conference isn't going to tell us a ton about this team, because I don't think whatever the Cougs do against the Longhorns tomorrow, I'm not going to really, if they like tie or somehow, maybe like lose by a more respectable margin, I'll let that be a nice positive data point, but I'm not going to take anything big from that. And also on the opposite end of the coin, I don't know if any of the other non-conference opponents really tell you anything. I think Texas State beating them on the road, I feel pretty decent about that, but even that one's pretty borderline. They're not that great of a Sun Belt program or women's soccer program generally. So I really think for me, it's some of the Big 12 games this team has, like your home games against Arizona and West Virginia in Big 12 play, feel like must wins, even though those two opponents aren't easy enough that U of H can expect to roll out and beat them. West Virginia was one of the Cougs wins last season, which is cool, but I think those are must win games, but not opponents that are going to be walkovers. And I think the trio of the road games at Utah, Oklahoma State, and Baylor, those three weren't great teams last year, though better than U of H. If you gave me one win and one tie from that group, Bobby, I'd be over the moon. Mm-hmm. None of the three are close to a game, but if they somehow get one win and one tie out of that, to me, provided you don't have a bunch of other baffling losses, this season has been a success. And I really do think if U of H got an easier draw scheduling wise, I think there'd be a case to be made this team could win 4 or 5 conference matches. And that's not even being super optimistic, but I think you got just about the hardest draw possible. So you have to be kind of looking at those 5 games as really your season, and what the Cougars do in those, I think, tells you what kind of improvement the team has made off last season.
Yeah, for me, the game that I have circled, not because I think it's a game the Cougars are going to win or anything like that. In fact, I don't think the Cougars are going to win this. I would bet money that the Cougars don't. But I think it's going to be a great barometer of where this team is and what it's going to look like the rest of the season. The conference opener at UCF. UCF projected to finish voted by media to finish 6th. The Cougs are projected to finish 14th. But it's early enough in the conference schedule, right? It's the first game that it's going to tell you if this team is going to have those games, the 5 games that you talked about, and how they're going to look in those. I think this is a great place to kind of see how you stack up. Sometimes you play somebody, and this is to the sport you play, right? You play paddle, I play golf. Sometimes you play with people who are better than you, and you know you're going to lose, but you do it to see, where's my game at? What am I even close to them? Am I making the right steps to do this, right? Or are we going the right way? We're probably not going to beat UCF, but sometimes you want to get out there with somebody who's a lot better than you and see if you can keep it close with them, right? I've played golf with guys who can go under par, and I'm nowhere near that. And it's like, okay, I'm getting better, right? I'm getting closer to them, but I'm not there yet. And then, so with it being so early on in the conference schedule, I really am looking forward to that game just to see how the Cougs go up against possibly a top 5 team in the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think you learn a lot from those kinds of games. So we'll be interested to see how the Cougars do tomorrow and here in non-conference play. We've talked about the football. We've talked about the football. We've talked about, I think, some really interesting football topics in the show with our new Fred Martin. Bobby, you ready to take us home?
Let's take it home. Well, that's it for this week's pod, everybody. Just some final housekeeping. If you have some feedback for Sam or I, or you just want to talk U of H sports, you can find us on Twitter at SH Podcast. If you know this, I don't really tweet on the SH Podcast account. I am avoiding that. No, I'm just kidding. If you want to just find me, I am at #1 Coug. If you just miss talking to Dustin and you want him in your life, you can find him at podcast@bsky.social. Or whatever you go there for. If you hate social media and only use email, you can get us at shpodcast@gmail.com. And if you heard all of that and want to throw some money at us, you certainly can. Check out our Patreon. We hope to pump out more and more exclusive Patreon content as the year goes on. And if you're still here, you absolutely rule. And as always,
go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!